I'm Erin. I am the curriculum author behind Let's Cultivate Greatness, and I create social studies resources for middle school and high school teachers, as well as homeschool families. Today, I want to give you a peek inside my Foundations of the United States Government and Civics workbook. It's part of a larger Foundations of Social Studies series, which has other books on economics and one on geography. And I really designed this series to give solid, focused coverage of each of these core social studies topics, because especially at the middle school level, oftentimes these topics are just folded into world history, US history, and really just brushed over rather than giving them their focused attention. However, I really designed, as we'll see when we get inside, with the fonts and the clip art, that this really could also serve as a crash course or a refresher for even an older student in high school, if that's something that they need. All right, let's take a peek inside. Taking a look at the table of contents, you can see that there are 7 core chapters. We have really starting off with what is government, why we have it, what its general purpose is, then going into the United States' specific form of government, taking a look at each of the 3 branches, what they do, what their powers are, then finishing off with what state and local governments are in charge of and how they interact with the federal government to form our system of federalism. Then lastly, kind of a fun unit or a fun chapter on symbols of the United States. Bald eagle, the Great Seal, the American flag, and kind of the history and how they connect to kind of our civic and patriotic identity as a country. So let's take a look at the chapter 3 for Congress and legislative branch. I'll give you a good idea of how all the chapters are structured. So in the beginning, there is a brief introduction, kind of textbook style reading that really introduces the topic, pulls out some vocabulary words and some reading comprehension questions. Then there are kind of 3 core activities to really help the student, your child, interact with the topic. So in this case, starting off with really understanding the difference between the House and the Senate. So filling in a Venn diagram, looking at the responsibilities and qualifications needed, and reflecting on why we have 2 houses and why they have the differences that they do. Okay. Then moving on, the next activity in this chapter, really looking at the steps for how a bill becomes a law, then some critical thinking about some sample laws and asking your student, your child, to really ask, why would someone want that to be a law? Why wouldn't someone want that to be a law? What kind of expert would you want to consult if you were a member of Congress thinking about passing that law? And the third one is where your student or child will then research who their 2 senators are and their representative, and learning a little bit about them. So as you can see, it's a lot of critical thinking, it's understanding, in this case, Congress and what it does, and then some real world application as well. So there's these 3 core activities, and then the final activity is some review games to help make sure the learning sticks, as well as some quiz questions. So all 7 chapters are set up that same way. In the very beginning, there is some pacing guide suggestions for how you could do this in a more slowed down version. You could do it in a more accelerated version, or really kind of at your own pace. And then some ideas if you wanted to do some extension activities, but really what's in the book is pretty good coverage on its own. And then some skills that are focused on. And of course, in the back of the book are the answer keys for all of the activities. So as you can see, this is a pretty full coverage course workbook for United States government and civics. Really works fantastic at the middle school level, but as you can see, really also does a good job as kind of a crash course or refresher for older kids. And so I'll put the links below where you can learn more about this book and for where you can purchase this. All right, thanks for watching.